At 19, the alien princess offended the human, so he quietly turned and left. HFY Sci-Fi Story. The city of Zyphara stretched like a jewel under the twin suns, its spires shining with colors that no human eye could fully comprehend. Each tower spiraled higher than the last, connected by translucent skybridges that glimmered as airships passed beneath them. The streets hummed with life, filled with aliens of every shape and color, moving with a grace and confidence that only centuries of civilization could breed. Amid this dazzling world, 19-year-old Princess Lyra walked with the confidence of someone who knew the eyes of the galaxy were on her. Lyra was known for her sharp mind and sharper tongue. She had grown up in a palace that hovered above the city like a crown, where she learned not only the ways of diplomacy, but also the subtle arts of observation, manipulation, and command. Her beauty was the kind that turned heads, but it was her intelligence and boldness that earned the respect, and sometimes the fear, of those around her. At the Interstellar Youth Summit, she was in her element, a bright star among delegations from countless worlds. The summit was a rare event where young diplomats, scientists, and thinkers from across the galaxy gathered to share knowledge, forge alliances, and display the strengths of their civilizations. Humans were represented by only a handful of delegates, but one young man had already begun to draw attention without even speaking. Ethan Hale, an Earth-born diplomat of 21, carried himself with a quiet confidence. He did not move with the grace of Zypharans, nor did he rely on charm or flair. Instead, his calm, measured presence made it impossible to ignore him. Lyra had heard whispers about him before she even saw him. They called him the human who walks like he owns no one's attention but commands it anyway. Such a description amused her. Humans were said to be fragile, reckless, and primitive. How could one so young pose any kind of threat or interest? The curiosity in her mind grew into a challenge. She would see for herself what made this human so remarkable. She approached him in the grand hall, her silvery robes flowing behind her like liquid light. The hall itself was a spectacle, with floating platforms and holographic projections of past summit victories, achievements, and historical events. Lyra's eyes sparkled as she studied Ethan. His posture was relaxed but alert, his brown eyes calm, analyzing the crowd without being drawn into it. She smiled, sensing an opportunity for amusement. "Earthling," she began, her voice melodic but edged with a teasing sharpness, "I hear your species believes itself clever. Yet in a universe this vast, one wonders what a human like you can truly contribute." There was no immediate reaction to her words, no defensiveness, no flinching. Instead, he inclined his head slightly, acknowledging her presence without aggression. "I am here to learn and to observe," he replied softly, his voice calm and steady, yet carrying a weight she had not expected. "I hope to represent my people with honesty." Most beings of her experience would have tried to match her wit to either impress or intimidate her. Ethan did neither. He merely stood polite and still, like a tree unmoved by wind. The princess could not resist. She leaned closer, lowering her voice so that only he could hear. "Humans are curious creatures, yet fragile, fragile in mind, fragile in body. Do you ever feel inferior?" He simply met her gaze and, after a moment that stretched longer than it should have, turned and walked away. The hall seemed to pause. The sound of floating platforms, humming energy, and soft chatter became distant as the onlookers processed what had just happened. Lyra's eyes widened slightly, and for the first time in her young life, she felt the sting of uncertainty. How could a human simply walk away after being insulted so directly? Did he not care? Did he not fear offending her in return? The whispers began almost immediately. The human, he left her standing there. Has anyone ever ignored Princess Lyra like that? He has courage or madness. She had been trained to command attention, to bend others to her will without raising her hand. And yet, here was a human, silent, unshaken, indifferent to her charm, her intellect, and even her insults. That evening, in the privacy of her quarters, Lyra stared at the city below. The twin suns were setting, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. She could not shake the image of Ethan walking through the crowd, calm and composed, unaffected by the whispers or the gasps. Something about his silence felt dangerous, in a way she did not yet understand. Meanwhile, Ethan returned to the human delegation's quarters, carrying himself with the same quiet dignity he had displayed in the hall. He did not speak of the encounter. He did not boast or gloat. His mind, always analytical, catalogued the experience, noting the princess's reactions, her demeanor, her intent. To him, she was not a threat yet, but she was an interesting variable in a complex equation. That night, Lyra could not sleep. Her usual routines, her studied calm, her practiced confidence, all seemed trivial now. She replayed the encounter over and over, analyzing his silence. Why did he not react? Why did he not engage in verbal sparring? His calmness was unlike anything she had encountered among the alien delegates, all of whom had at least some pride or arrogance she could exploit. Across the galaxy, humans had long been underestimated. Their technology was modest compared to Zephyra, their physical abilities unremarkable, and their diplomacy often clumsy. And yet, somehow, humans like Ethan carried a quiet power that could not be measured by any device or computation. It was a power of presence, of principles, of unshakable confidence in themselves. Lyra resolved to learn more. She would find out why this human dared to defy her, dared to treat her as an equal, or perhaps as irrelevant. The spark of curiosity, mingled with a rare humility, pushed her to take risks she had never considered before. The next day, the summit continued with debates, demonstrations, and displays of interstellar innovation. Lyra watched Ethan move among the other delegates, quietly observing, engaging only when necessary, yet leaving an impression of quiet strength wherever he went. When he offered a solution to a technical problem that had stumped several alien engineers, there was no fanfare. He simply spoke, calmly and clearly, and the solution worked. Lyra realized that humans were unpredictable in ways that machines and algorithms could not anticipate. Their strength did not lie in brute force, or in speed, or even in intellect alone. It lay in adaptability, in judgment, in the ability to read situations and act in ways that were entirely unexpected. And that made them dangerous. By the end of the day, she had made her decision. She would challenge him, not through insults or pride, but through direct engagement. She wanted to understand this human, to see if his quiet strength could withstand tests more demanding than social interaction. She would provoke him, and if he faltered, she would know her victory. If he did not, well, that would be a lesson she could not ignore. Ethan, meanwhile, continued his observations. He noted the dynamics of Zypharan politics, the interactions among alien youths, the subtle maneuvers that indicated alliances and rivalries. He was aware of the princess's gaze, of the whispers that followed him. He did not fear her, nor did he seek her approval. He simply understood that in every situation some would try to dominate, some would try to charm, and some would underestimate him. His strength lay not in confrontation but in self-possession. As night fell over Zephyra, the city glittered like a constellation of its own, each tower reflecting light in colors that were both alien and mesmerizing. Princess Lyra stood at her balcony, her thoughts restless, tracing the paths Ethan had walked earlier in the day. She felt a mixture of frustration and fascination, an unfamiliar feeling that made her pulse quicken. Here was a human who had offended her not by insult, but by ignoring her, and in doing so, had shaken something deep within her understanding of power and influence. Somewhere in the human quarters, Ethan slept lightly, his mind still active, cataloging, analyzing, planning. Neither spoke of the encounter directly, yet both felt its impact. One had left a mark through silence and dignity. The other was left questioning what it truly meant to command respect and influence without asserting it overtly. And so, the first chapter of their story ended not with confrontation, nor with victory, but with a quiet tension that stretched across the glittering city of Zyphara, a tension that promised that the days to come would test not only their wits, but the very nature of human potential among the stars. The sun rose over Zyphara, spilling golden light over the city's spires and skybridges. Princess Lyra, restless and determined, stood once again in her palace quarters. Her mind replayed the memory of the human, Ethan Hale, walking away from her insult without a single word. That simple act had unsettled her in a way no flattery or obedience ever could. It was rare for anyone to ignore her authority, and rarer still for someone to do so calmly, confidently, and without fear. Lyra's curiosity had shifted to determination. She needed to understand him, to test his limits, and perhaps to see if humans truly deserved the whispers of admiration that had begun circulating among the delegates. She did not want to humiliate him. She wanted to see his strength, to witness the power that lay hidden beneath the quiet demeanor. By mid-morning, she had arranged a challenge. The summit included a simulation arena, a vast holographic chamber where delegates could test their strategic and diplomatic abilities in a controlled environment. Each simulation required quick thinking, problem-solving, and leadership skills. It was a favorite among alien youth who wanted to demonstrate superiority in calculated ways. For Lyra, this arena became the perfect stage. Ethan arrived at the arena, his calm presence immediately noticeable among the energetic and sometimes arrogant aliens. They buzzed with anticipation, ready to see if this human, already whispered about, could actually perform under pressure. Lyra was already there, her silver robes glinting under the artificial sunlight of the arena. Her expression was cool, but her mind was sharp, analyzing every detail of the human before her. "Welcome, Earthling," she said, her voice polite but tinged with curiosity. "I hope you are prepared for what comes next. The arena tests more than skill, it tests character, patience, and resolve." Holographic landscapes unfolded around them, shifting between cities, battlefields, and interstellar environments. The challenge was simple in description but complex in execution. Delegates had to respond to crises, manage resources, negotiate alliances, and resolve conflicts. Points were earned not only by successful actions, but also by the efficiency, creativity, and morality of each decision. Lyra acted quickly, using her advanced knowledge of Zypharan tactics and technology. She deployed resources flawlessly, anticipating moves and countermoves with the precision her species prided itself on. She expected Ethan to stumble under pressure, to make errors that she could exploit. Instead, he observed first. His eyes scanned the shifting holographic terrain, noting not just what was happening but why it was happening. While the aliens calculated probabilities and outcomes, Ethan considered patterns, human psychology, and adaptability. His first moves were modest, almost hesitant, but each choice revealed a subtle brilliance. He adapted strategies that seemed rigidly defined, bending rules and outcomes in ways the simulation designers had not intended. Lyra's eyes narrowed. She had never seen a delegate navigate the arena with such calm precision. Every time she thought she had him cornered, Ethan made a decision that balanced risk and ingenuity. He did not react with aggression or arrogance. He responded with understanding, observing, and anticipating consequences with an almost intuitive sense. Hours passed, yet the simulation showed no signs of fatigue or error from the human. Lyra's frustration grew, but so did her fascination. He was unpredictable, yet methodical. He could not be outsmarted with arrogance alone. The crowd, initially murmuring about the alien princess's confidence, now watched with a mix of shock and admiration. Humans were not supposed to perform like this, yet here he was, quietly excelling in a test designed to challenge the best minds of the galaxy. Lyra decided to escalate the challenge. She introduced new variables, unpredictable crises, moral dilemmas, and complex negotiations with simulated alien factions. Each scenario was designed to test a delegate's patience, ingenuity, and ability to lead. She expected confusion, hesitation, maybe even failure. Ethan's responses were measured but creative. When one simulated colony faced famine, he negotiated trade agreements that balanced fairness with survival. When a simulated fleet was trapped in an ambush, he used unconventional tactics to outmaneuver the enemy without unnecessary loss. He thought beyond the simulation's parameters, seeing possibilities the system did not account for. Lyra felt a strange respect building. The human was not just clever. He was adaptable, courageous, and principled. His strength did not come from technology or brute intelligence, but from a combination of observation, creativity, and calm decisiveness. He was the living proof that humans were underestimated not because they were weak, but because their power was subtle, quiet, and unpredictable. She interrupted him at one point, sending a final, difficult crisis his way. A simulated rebel group threatened to destroy a strategic city unless their demands were met. The ethical and tactical stakes were high. Most delegates would react either with fear or calculated aggression, but Ethan paused, considering the long-term implications of every choice. Then calmly, he made his move. He brokered a solution that preserved the city, minimized casualties, and secured cooperation from the rebels. The simulation awarded him maximum points, and the spectators fell silent. Lyra's pride was wounded, yet she could not deny the admiration rising within her. Here was a human who had bested her expectations not by challenging her directly, but by showing quiet mastery of challenges she believed only aliens could handle. She realized that intelligence alone was not enough. Creativity, adaptability, and principle made a being truly formidable. The final moments of the simulation arrived. Lyra tried one last maneuver, introducing a cascading crisis that required split-second decision-making under pressure. The arena's holographic environment shifted violently, simulating a planet-wide disaster. Aliens faltered, some panicked, but Ethan responded with calm logic, improvising solutions in ways the designers had not predicted. When the simulation ended, the results were clear. Ethan had not only completed every challenge successfully, but had often done so with elegance and ingenuity that surpassed even Sci-Fi expectations. Delegates whispered among themselves, some in disbelief, some in quiet awe. The princess, standing in the observation platform above, could only nod slightly. "You were remarkable," she admitted quietly, almost to herself. She had intended to see him fail, to remind herself that humans were fragile and limited, but the exercise had proven the opposite. His strength was different, subtle yet profound, and it was impossible to ignore. Ethan, observing the reactions of the crowd, remained composed. He did not boast, did not demand praise. His calm presence spoke louder than words. The crowd recognized it, the delegates recognized it, and Lyra recognized it most of all. She realized that humans were unpredictable, adaptive, and courageous in ways no alien species could fully calculate. After the simulation, the two of them were alone in a side chamber. Lyra studied him with a new perspective. "I underestimated you," she admitted, her tone measured. "Your species, perhaps you are more than what I was told." Here was a being who had faced her, a princess of one of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, and had done so without arrogance, without fear, and without compromise. She felt a mixture of frustration and admiration. As the day ended, delegates departed from the arena, some praising, some whispering, all changed by what they had witnessed. Lyra stayed behind, contemplating the implications. Humans were not only a species to be aware of, they were a species to be studied, respected, and perhaps even feared in a way. Ethan returned to the human quarters, still composed, still calm. He reflected on the simulation, analyzing every choice, every response. To him, the exercise was not about victory or recognition. It was about demonstrating human principles, adaptability, creativity, and resilience, without needing to shout or demand attention. That night, as the twin moons of Zyphara rose over the city, Lyra gazed out from her balcony, a soft wind ruffling her silvery hair. She could not forget the human who had moved through her world with quiet confidence, a human who had met her challenges not with arrogance, but with dignity and brilliance. She felt a spark of respect, a rare and unusual emotion for someone so used to commanding admiration. Somewhere in the human quarters, Ethan slept lightly, dreaming not of glory but of possibilities, of strategies, alliances, and challenges yet to come. The first day of their encounter had passed, but the tension between them had only grown, a quiet but potent force stretching across the summit. The galaxy had witnessed the start of a story that would not be told in loud victories or dramatic speeches, but in subtle demonstrations of strength, principle, and ingenuity. Humans had quietly proven themselves, and the world, or at least Zyphara, would never underestimate them again. The next morning, the city of Zyphara gleamed under the twin suns, its towers reflecting light that seemed almost alive. The streets were busier than usual, filled with delegates recounting the events of the simulation arena from the previous day. Whispers of the human, Ethan Hale, circulated like wildfire. He had not only held his own but had outperformed the best the alien youth could offer. Princess Lyra walked through the palace corridors, her mind restless. For the first time, she felt a sense of challenge she could not dismiss with arrogance or status. She had watched Ethan solve impossible problems, adapt under pressure, and make choices that demonstrated strength without cruelty or pride. He was calm, patient, principled, and unpredictable, the qualities she knew were rare in any species. Lyra had made a decision. She would speak to him, not as a princess speaking to a subordinate, nor as a provocateur testing him for amusement. She wanted to understand him, perhaps even guide him in subtle ways. She wanted to see how deep his principles ran. She found him in the observation deck of the summit, overlooking the city below. He stood quietly, watching airships glide between towers, his hands clasped behind his back. The sunlight glinted off the glass panels, illuminating his calm, deliberate expression. Lyra approached him, her steps soft yet confident. "You performed admirably yesterday," she said, her voice steady but carrying the weight of her curiosity. "I underestimated your species. That was a mistake. It only means others fail to see our strengths. You would be an honored guest, with access to our archives, our scientists, our technology. You could learn far more than any simulation could teach you." His people had sent him to observe, to learn, and to demonstrate what humans were capable of. Staying for personal gain was not part of his mission or his character. "I appreciate the offer," he said finally, his tone calm but firm. "But my place is with my people. I have responsibilities beyond my own curiosity or comfort." His strength lay in his consistency, his calm, and his ability to act decisively when others faltered. Determined to test him further, Lyra suggested another challenge. This time, it was not a simulation but a real diplomatic exercise involving live negotiations with several alien delegations. The stakes were higher, and the complexity was greater. She wanted to see if humans could operate effectively in situations where emotion, persuasion, and subtle manipulation were as important as intelligence. Ethan accepted. The human delegation entered the negotiation hall, where representatives from multiple worlds were already assembled. The topic was a contentious one, a dispute over trade routes that spanned multiple star systems. Some delegates sought dominance, others compromise, and some simply aimed to exploit the situation for personal gain. Lyra observed from the balcony above, her interest piqued. She had expected chaos, yet Ethan approached the table with calm composure. He listened first, asking questions to understand the positions, the motivations, and the underlying interests of each party. He did not argue aggressively, nor did he seek to dominate the discussion. Instead, he built a subtle framework of trust, using logic, empathy, and careful observation to guide the process. Hours passed, and what began as a potentially volatile confrontation transformed into a surprisingly productive dialogue. Ethan proposed solutions that balanced fairness and efficiency, satisfying parties who had been ready to clash violently. He anticipated objections before they were voiced, addressed hidden concerns with tact, and inspired cooperation without demanding it. Lyra watched, her admiration growing even as her pride flared. This human, whom she had expected to falter under pressure, was demonstrating the very qualities that made humans so difficult to predict and so powerful in subtle ways. It was not technology or raw intellect that gave them an edge, it was adaptability, creativity, empathy, and moral courage. When the negotiations concluded successfully, the room erupted in cautious applause. Delegates exchanged glances, some in disbelief, some in quiet admiration. Lyra descended to the hall, her silver robes flowing around her as she approached Ethan. "You continue to surprise me," she said, her tone measured but carrying genuine respect. "I expected someone who would falter under pressure, yet you have turned every challenge into success. You are remarkable." Yet this human had shown her that leadership, influence, and power could exist without dominance or fear. It could exist quietly, decisively, and with principle. That evening, Lyra invited Ethan to walk with her through the palace gardens. The gardens were vast, filled with alien flora that glowed softly in the twilight. Paths wound around crystal-clear ponds and floating lanterns illuminated the way. Lyra spoke of Sci-Fi, its history, its people, and its values. She asked him questions, probing his thoughts, his reasoning, and his motivations. Ethan answered honestly, never boastful, never dismissive. He spoke of Earth, of human history, of the challenges and strengths of his species. He did not claim superiority, but he did not apologize for it either. He simply presented facts and principles, leaving it to others to draw their conclusions. As they walked, Lyra realized that her initial desire to test him had shifted. She was no longer merely curious or competitive. She was observing something rare, a human whose quiet strength commanded respect without demanding it. She was beginning to understand why humans had survived, thrived, and even influenced civilizations far more advanced than their own. Yet beneath her admiration was a restlessness she could not ignore. Humans were unpredictable. They could not be fully controlled or understood. They had principles that were often foreign to alien logic, and they could act decisively when others hesitated. She felt both awe and unease, a combination that she had never experienced before. The next day, the summit began to wind down. Delegates prepared to depart, and the city was alive with farewells, discussions, and reflections. Lyra approached Ethan once more, offering a final attempt to convince him to stay on Sci-Fi. She framed it as a chance to continue learning, to engage with scholars and leaders, and to experience what few humans ever could. Ethan listened quietly. He appreciated the offer, but he knew his path. His duty was to return to Earth, to continue his mission of observation and representation. He had demonstrated the capabilities of his species, and now it was time to leave. "I am grateful," he said, his voice calm, "but my responsibilities lie elsewhere. I will return when necessary, but for now I must go." But Ethan had shown her that human resolve was not easily swayed. To challenge him was to respect him, and to respect him was to recognize a strength that was unlike any she had encountered. When Ethan departed, he did so quietly. There were no dramatic gestures, no grand speeches. He simply walked through the summit, his head held high, leaving behind a room full of witnesses who understood that something extraordinary had just occurred. Lyra watched from the balcony, her silver robes catching the fading sunlight, and felt a strange mixture of pride, frustration, and admiration. She had not lost a battle, but she had witnessed something far greater, the undeniable power of human principle and resolve. The whispers of delegates spread even faster than before. Stories circulated of the human who had walked away from insult, who had bested simulations, who had negotiated disputes with skill and principle, and who had left quietly, yet with an aura of authority. Ethan's reputation began to grow, not through conquest or power, but through demonstrated competence, intelligence, and quiet confidence. That night, Lyra remained awake, contemplating the human-'s departure. She realized that the lessons of the summit were not about superiority or conquest, but about understanding, adaptability, and principle. Humans were not fragile, nor were they simple. They were complex, unpredictable, and resilient in ways that could not be calculated by even the most advanced algorithms. Somewhere across the city, Ethan rested lightly, reflecting on his experiences. He had demonstrated what humans were capable of, but he had done so quietly, without seeking praise or recognition. He had navigated alien challenges with principle and calm, showing that strength often lay not in aggression or dominance, but in observation, adaptability, and moral courage. The story of the human who had quietly turned and left was no longer just a tale of defiance. It was a lesson to Zyphara and eventually to the galaxy. Underestimate humans at your peril, for their strength is subtle, principled, and unpredictable. As the twin moons rose over Zyphara, casting silver light across the city, both Lyra and Ethan reflected on the events that had unfolded. One had left with dignity, the other had observed with humility. And between them, a quiet tension remained, a tension that promised challenges, lessons, and encounters yet to come. The galaxy had witnessed something extraordinary. Not a battle fought with weapons, not a conquest claimed with armies, but the quiet assertion of human capability and principle. And it was only the beginning. Months passed since the Interstellar Youth Summit on Zyphara, and the galaxy had begun to remember the quiet human who had turned and left, leaving an impression that no alien mind could easily forget. Stories traveled faster than light through diplomatic channels, starship logs, and informal gossip. The tale of Ethan Hale, the human who had quietly bested alien simulations, negotiated impossible disputes, and refused to be swayed by royalty, became a quiet legend. His strength was not in brute force or arrogance, but in observation, adaptability, principle, and courage. Meanwhile, on a distant colony near the edge of Zyphara's system, a crisis unfolded. A rogue alien fleet, aggressive and technologically superior, had threatened the colony's survival. Panic spread among the settlers, and even seasoned Zypharan commanders hesitated to act decisively. The political climate was tense, alliances wavered, and the possibility of catastrophe loomed large. It was a situation that required not only intelligence, but also intuition, leadership, and calm decision-making under extreme pressure. Unexpectedly, Zyphara sent a request for human assistance. The leaders remembered the young human diplomat who had demonstrated remarkable ingenuity and composure. Princess Lyra herself recommended Ethan, now understanding fully that the human strength lay not in their size or technology, but in their ability to adapt, strategize, and inspire courage among others. Ethan received the message quietly. He considered the request carefully, weighing responsibilities, strategy, and the stakes for both humans and the colony. Without hesitation, he accepted. Humans had a reputation for stepping into crises, not because they sought glory, but because they understood the value of action, principle, and responsibility. He arrived at the colony to find chaos. Settlers were frightened, supply lines were disrupted, and the rogue fleet loomed menacingly in orbit. Many Zypharan commanders had already retreated to distant positions, wary of direct confrontation. Ethan assessed the situation calmly, noting the gaps in defense, the strengths and weaknesses of the fleet, and the morale of the settlers. He did not panic, nor did he act impulsively. His mind worked like a finely tuned instrument, analyzing, predicting, and creating possibilities no one else had seen. Ethan called a meeting of the colony's leaders. He spoke simply but clearly, outlining a plan that was both bold and achievable. Rather than relying on overwhelming force, he suggested using deception, strategic retreats, and alliances with unexpected local factions. His plan was unconventional, blending diplomacy, strategy, and human ingenuity. Many of the leaders hesitated, unsure that such a small force could succeed, but his calm assurance and clear reasoning persuaded them to trust him. The first stage of his plan involved securing supply lines and forming alliances with neutral factions in the region. Ethan personally negotiated with leaders who had long been skeptical of outsiders, using logic, empathy, and insight into their motivations. He listened, understood, and proposed solutions that addressed their fears and needs. Slowly, factions that had been indifferent or even hostile agreed to cooperate, providing critical resources and support. Meanwhile, Lyra observed from Zyphara, communicating occasionally through secure channels. She noted Ethan's methods with admiration. He did not command with arrogance, nor did he impose his will. Instead, he inspired trust, instilled confidence, and allowed others to act while guiding them subtly. She realized that humans had an edge that could not be measured by technology or brute force: the ability to unite disparate forces through principle, observation, and empathy. When the rogue fleet finally attacked, Ethan's plan unfolded with precision. Using a combination of deception, strategic positioning, and calculated risks, he drew the enemy into traps that minimized casualties while maximizing effectiveness. He anticipated moves and countermoves, improvising where necessary, always keeping the long-term objective in mind. His calm under pressure inspired those around him, turning fear into coordinated action. As the battle reached its climax, the rogue fleet found itself surrounded, outmaneuvered, and unsure of the human strategy. Ethan had turned what seemed an impossible situation into a controlled engagement, using ingenuity and human adaptability to prevail. The settlers survived, their morale intact, and the rogue fleet was neutralized without the colony suffering devastation. Lyra arrived shortly afterward, not as a princess seeking dominance, but as an observer eager to witness the humans' methods firsthand. She watched Ethan coordinate recovery efforts, allocate resources, and organize defenses against potential future threats. His calm leadership, decisiveness, and ability to inspire cooperation impressed her deeply. She had expected intelligence, but what she saw was far greater: human ingenuity applied with principle, empathy, and courage. After the crisis, the colony held a ceremony to honor those who had saved it. Many delegates expected the Xipharan commanders to receive accolades, but instead, Ethan was quietly recognized for his leadership. He did not seek recognition. He accepted it with humility, acknowledging the contributions of the settlers and the local factions who had trusted his judgment. Lyra approached him privately afterward. She no longer felt the need to test him, nor the desire to assert superiority. She spoke simply, her voice tinged with awe. "You have shown me what I did not understand. Humans are not fragile." "You are remarkable, Ethan." Power was not only in command, authority, or intelligence. True power lay in the ability to act with principle, to inspire others, and to remain calm under pressure. Humans possessed that in abundance, and it was a force that no alien race could easily predict or control. News of Ethan's success spread across the galaxy. He became a symbol of human potential, not because of conquest or violence, but because of his ingenuity, courage, and calm leadership. Other species began to view humans with a mixture of respect, caution, and curiosity. Even those who had once dismissed humanity as primitive began to recognize that their underestimated strength was subtle, yet profound. Lyra returned to Zyphara with a new perspective. She had learned that respect could not be demanded, that strength was not always visible, and that humans, though young and physically modest compared to many alien species, possessed a resilience and ingenuity that set them apart. She often reflected on the day Ethan had quietly turned and left the summit, realizing that his silence had spoken louder than words, and that human principle was as formidable as any weapon or technology. Ethan returned to Earth, but his impact was lasting. He had not only demonstrated human capabilities, but had also inspired confidence among allies, respect among former skeptics, and admiration across the galaxy. He had shown that humans, though often underestimated, were capable of extraordinary feats when guided by observation, adaptability, and principle. Months later, Lyra would tell her advisors of the human who had changed her understanding of strength and leadership. Delegates from other worlds would recount the story of a young human diplomat who had faced alien royalty, survived impossible simulations, negotiated peace in tense disputes, and quietly led a colony to safety. His legend would grow, not through conquest or aggression, but through ingenuity, courage, and quiet action. The galaxy had learned an invaluable lesson. Humans could not be judged by appearances or assumptions. Their strength was unique, subtle, and sometimes invisible until it revealed itself in moments that mattered most. And when it did, it left a mark that no one, not even an alien princess, could ignore. As the twin moons of Zyphara cast silver light over the city, Lyra looked out over the towers and reflected on what she had witnessed. The human, who had once quietly turned and left the summit, had returned not with fanfare or drama, but with wisdom and leadership that saved lives. She realized that humility, courage, and intelligence combined in humans to create a force that could influence entire civilizations. Ethan Hale's journey was far from over, yet the galaxy had already been changed by his quiet actions. He had proven that humanity was not fragile, not primitive, and not easily dismissed. They could survive, adapt, and thrive, even in the most complex and dangerous situations. And perhaps most importantly, they could do so with dignity, principle, and the quiet strength that left even the most confident alien observers in awe. For Princess Lyra, the lesson was personal as well as universal. She had met a human and seen firsthand what her people had long ignored. Respect was earned, strength was measured not by force alone, and even the mightiest civilizations could underestimate those who carried their abilities in silence and principle. She would never forget the day Ethan Hale had quietly turned and left, and the many ways that simple act had changed her understanding of power, influence, and human potential. In the end, the story of the human who left quietly became a lasting symbol across the galaxy, not of conquest but of courage, not of arrogance but of principle, not of noise but of quiet, undeniable strength. And for every observer, young or old, alien or human, it was a reminder that humans, though underestimated, were capable of extraordinary feats when they acted with understanding, courage, and unwavering principle.